audiobook fans and narrators. My friend Alan Ruben is here, and he's going to walk us through how he works with actors to deliver those riveting performances that make us feel like we're living inside the story. Paul is widely considered to be one of the best audiobook directors in the world. He started as an actor, touring with Second City, and then just found more joy directing other actors. So he started a production company with his wife, Paula, who you'll meet next week, to collaborate with authors and publishers. And they ran the company for about 20 years before selling it and produced and directed hundreds of titles. And Paul became one of the go-to directors for high-profile books with celebrities. And he has won a ton of awards, including 2 Grammys for Al Franken's Lies and The Lying Lies Who Tell Them, and Always Looking Up with Michael J. Fox, which he co-directed with Paula. I met Paul at the Audio Publishers Conference in New York many years ago. I was listening to him speak on a panel about working with actors, and I was sitting with my partner at the time, Scott Brick, and a bunch of our friends, some of the best audiobook narrators. Simon Barnes was with us, Katie Kelgren and Dion Graham, Kate Amazer and Cassandra Campbell were there, and we were all blown away. And they were very excited about taking their work to this emotionally raw place. And so some of them organised a private class to study with Paul, and I was lucky enough to attend and watched him take the performances of these great actors to a whole other level. And so at the request of some of these top LA narrators, Paul started coming out to LA and directing books and coaching people at Random House. And so Scott invited him to stay at our house. And so one afternoon, I drove him out to Random House, and we were in the car for about an hour together, and we just could not stop talking. And a beautiful friendship was born. And then I met Paula in New York and fell in love with her on a subway ride, which I'll tell you about next week. And for the past 15 years, Paul and Paula have become my family. I stay with them every time I'm in New York, and we just have so much fun. They're 2 of my favorite people to talk about art and story and politics and anything else that comes up. These people are just really special. They are brilliant practitioners, and they're just really kind and generous people. And they love stories and actors and listeners like yourself. So we're going to hear from Paul this week and then get Paula's perspective next week. Paul is also a really incredible writer. He wrote for TV and theatre earlier in his career and has contributed articles to the Washington Post and other publications. And he's now writing literary fiction. And his short story collection, Terms of Engagement, Stories of the Father and Son, was published in 2018 and, of course, was narrated by a stellar cast, including Scott, George Guadal, and other great narrators. If you are an actor, you are going to get some gold today. And if you're an audiobook listener, I think you'll find it interesting to hear how the sausage is made, so to speak. It may change how you choose audiobooks and listen to them in the future. Oh, look, I'm just really excited for you to hear what he has to say. So let's get the skinny from Paul Ruben. Oh, Paul, I'm so excited we get to talk about story and have one of our fantastic conversations. So how did you know that you were a director? Where did that start for you?
I know that I knew I was a director when I directed the play Waiting for Godot in college. And one of the things that reminded me, or that sort of reinforced that, even though I knew it, but it hadn't set yet. It's kind of like cement. So the cement hadn't settled. And in the course of my life for a few years after, I sort of stepped in the cement, but it wasn't, your foot sunk into it. But anyway, I knew because I felt completely connected to from here to attempting to find actable vocabulary to direct the actors, and I felt one with it. I felt connected, as opposed to performing, where I had a very different feeling.
So what was the feeling when you were performing?
The feeling when I was performing had to do with a part of me that knew that I could get a laugh. I knew I could be funny. So what I thought to myself was, I don't want the lead role. That's too much for me to memorize. Just get on the stage, get a couple of laughs, and get out. And that's how that for me was acting, but it wasn't acting. It was performing, it was being silly, and it wasn't really, really connecting here.
Yeah.
It wasn't a particular way. It's like eating, getting a laugh and getting a big house laugh. When I was at Second City, for example, coming out on the stage and getting that big house laugh is I presume, like, I never did shoot up, but it's magical.
I mean, it is a rush, isn't it, to get that
It is a lot.
validation? Yeah, you're great. You're worth something. So, was that what the sort of drug, for want of a better expression, was for you about being funny? What was it about being funny that was a draw card for you?
I think what I can say in hindsight, I didn't think of it then. In hindsight, I think what was so drawing about it was is that it was instant, deep acknowledgement. That was something
Yeah.
that I think was missing in much of my life, and there it was, acknowledgement. If you say something and the entire room laughs, well, you can't deny it, right?
Yeah.
It's a laugh. You get it.
So, if you knew that you were a director, why
Yes.
did you then go into acting?
I think life is complicated. I'm a little reluctant to analyze myself. I think what I believed was that there was that drug of being funny was something that I just wanted to continue to find my way into, and so I had enough success to propel that, and that's what did it. So I was in the Second City touring company for almost a year. I could have been in the main company. I had a horrible time there. I didn't like anybody. That's another story. Doesn't matter. But I was funny. I was good, and they all knew it. They actually asked me to go to Canada, and I thought there was Siberia, and I didn't want to go. But I had a lot of, you know, I was funny. So it was that sort of thing. And then when I came to New York, I had my own improv company. I was funny there too. We were all funny. You know, that
Yeah.
said, that said, periodically I would direct something, and then and I've directed plays. I have worked with some celebrities in plays. I directed non-celebrity performers, and I enjoyed that too. But it and again, I don't think that early on that it occurred to me, but it was a deeper, more connecting feeling that ultimately, mercifully, um, from my perspective, uh, the cement hardened. And then once that occurred, right now I have no desire to perform, although I have narrated some audiobooks. And so I've narrated 5 audiobooks and won 2 little awards for the 5. So you can see where it's very tempting that I don't want to do it anymore. Never. I wouldn't do it.
So if you went into acting and kind of were ignoring your instincts because you were getting that acknowledgement and you were funny and you were riding that wave, what was the it has to be me or it does not have to be me to do that anymore, where you started listening to your instinct of what was really connected for you?
Well,
What was the turning point?
I appreciate the question. And again, I certainly didn't think of it with the vocabulary that you're using, although I intuitively knew that if it has to be me, if me is the issue, who am I? What am I? How? What is it that makes me feel fully connected? It was directing, and 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 the more I directed, the more I felt that way, to the degree where now that's how I feel totally. I don't miss acting at all. I don't miss being silly at all. But I would miss
So what was it in you where really listened to that?
what it was it okay, what it was in me that listened to that was the feedback that I got from the talent. Meaning
Okay. So that was another kind of acknowledgement then.
another kind of acknowledgement.
Yeah.
I want
Okay.
to say it again, I need to say that the stories we have about ourselves, from my perspective, are fairly made up, but if they work for you, then groovy.
Yeah.
It works for me. The feedback that I got felt a little deeper, a little more profound than me going on the stage and saying something silly and getting a laugh. This felt much deeper, much
Mm.
connecting. It gave me the feeling that this was a purpose that had roots that I could explore. And at the end of the day, um, getting a laugh is getting a laugh. Just it just did not do anything for my mental health. It didn't do anything for how I felt about myself. Directing does.
So was it as much about the connection that you had with the other actor in that dynamic where
Yeah.
you were bringing something out in them and creating a dynamic with the story in a more meaningful way for you?
Yes. Yes. And the proof in the pudding for me is that the more I directed, the more I wanted to be a better director. To go on a stage and be silly, I never had the feeling that, oh no, I got to be better, I got to be sillier, I got to be funnier. Not really. But the directing felt much more enriching. It felt like a richer experience, and it made this little light in here shine more.
Yeah.
So that over the past, say, 30 years or so as a director, from my perspective, um, I think in the world that I occupy, in the space that I occupy now as an audiobook director, which to me is just basically an acting teacher or acting director, I feel as though that I've done a pretty good job of developing very, very actable vocabulary that really assists actors in connecting themselves to the story, meaning actually to the feelings, to the subtext. So I can talk about it forever. I don't think I could talk about being funny forever. I talk about it for like a minute.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. So this sustains you
Yes, it
like
sustains me.
oxygen.
Like oxygen. Yes, it's
Yeah.
much more sustaining. And
And it's very alluring, this vocabulary that you have developed and this way of working with actors, which is unique in the audiobook environment where we have a landscape where a lot of directors are just basically technical directors. Hang on a second, you missed that word. You need to say that again. You mispronounced it. Hang on a second, I can't hear you. That kind of stuff, right? They're not actually performance directors. They're not story-driven directors like
correct.
you are, like Paula is. There's a
Yes.
handful of you, but it's quite rare. So I remember being at the big audiobook conference and sitting with literally the stars of the audiobook world: Scott Brick, Simon Vance, Dion Graham, Katie Kelgren. I mean, it was just the who's who of them. And I remember you sitting on this panel talking about story, narrative, how to bring the story to life for actors. And I remember them all sitting there just going, we have to work with him. We have to work with him. We have to bring him out to LA. We have to bring him to, I mean, it was, I remember that moment so vividly. And then so many of those people came to work with you. I watched you take what we consider to be the great narrators of the world to a whole other level, with their performance. And it was really, truly exhilarating. So how did you develop that vocabulary as an audiobook director?
So if it's not too in the weeds, we could unpack that a
Okay,
little.
let's get in the weeds. Let's get
All
in the
right.
weeds.
Okay. So let's say that I worked with, which I did, a lot of the very well known, and they're the best performers. And so here's what I think I do as a director. So I don't think I've ever given a line reading. I'm sure I've given a couple if they begged me for it and said, well, if you want a bad line reading, that I can give you. We don't give actors line readings. So
We always say that's the cheats way of directing. That's the
it is.
lazy way
So
of
my
directing.
feeling is that I'm here to drive you crazy, and you're there to do all the heavy lifting. And so, how do I
Mm.
do that? So I'm being somewhat facetious, not really drive you crazy, but here's what I really am there to do. I'm there to connect, to be sure that you are connected to the emotional consequence of the story 100% of the time, and particularly in audiobook world where you're actually reading, and the irony, or what's sort of counterintuitive in a particular way, is that the listener doesn't want to think you're reading. They want to experience this kind of willing suspension of disbelief where they want to feel as though it's all happening right now. So how do you do that? How do you get there? How does an actor not read, which many of them do in varying degrees, what they do is that I am saying to them, okay, first of all, what's the feeling? What is the feeling? How does Tess feel right now? Happy, sad, angry, etc. What are the stakes? 1 to 10, how high are the stakes? And how connected are you to those stakes? And you know what the actors say if I say that to them a lot of times? Oh, well, I don't know, 3, 4. Yeah, okay, fine. But no, everything's a 10. Not a 10 meaning you're scraping somebody off the wall, but a 10 meaning you are completely and totally emotionally committed to that subtext, to that feeling, and to replicating that feeling. And speaking of the word replicating, if I was in charge of the acting world, I would eliminate the nomenclature actor and I would substitute it with replicator. Because what the actor is doing is replicating real life to the degree that no one can tell. But acting, I don't even really know what that means. It sounds to me like acting means being someone you're not, which is always which I find a sort of interesting kind of vocabulary too. I get it. A common critique of actors is, well, he's always the same. She's always the same. I get that. I get that. That usually to me means that something's going on where the actor isn't really inside the feeling and they just kind of phoning it in or whatever, and it all sounds the same. But in fact, you're the actor. It's you. Everything that you intuit in a script emotionally is coming from inside of you. And so your job is essentially to create a kind of simulacrum that makes the listener feel as though this is reality, that this is happening in the moment right now. And that's what makes compelling storytelling and compelling acting. All audiobook narration is acting. There are some nuanced differences because you're in a booth and you can't scream at the top of your lungs, but at the end of the day, acting comes from here. Can I stand up? Right here. Yes.
Yeah.
And so that is true with whether you're on stage, whether you're in a film, play, TV, it all comes from here.
Yeah, what's coming up for me as I'm listening to you is this idea of performing, being performative. Going
Yes,
back to what you were saying before, that it didn't feel truly connected for you, that you were being funny, kind of hamming it up, maybe is how I was interpreting it.
yes,
It wasn't coming from a place that was truthful or real for you.
correct.
And, there is a real difference between showing, you
There
know,
is, there is.
and something that you always say when you direct people is, don't help me, don't help me.
Don't help me.
So take
Don't.
me inside of that.
So we can talk about that. Yes. So for example, I mean, if I could talk about one thing, if I asked, or if I was with a bunch of directors and somebody said, "What is a director? What is it?" My answer would be that a director, my job as a director is to assist the storyteller or the actor in being organically connected to the subtext 100% of the time and giving that back to me. And so back to your question about don't help me. My second job as a director, number 2, is to find actable vocabulary that assists the actor in doing just that. And so what I find with actors more than anything is that they sort of often cloak themselves with various habits and various kinds of things that they regard as technique. And honestly, I even have a problem with the word technique. I wouldn't go so far as to say, but I would say that you want to be very careful, because anything that sounds to me like it goes like the issue is that something comes from here to here means that it's not going to be 1,000% connected. So you got to be, I think, very cautious and careful when you talk about things like technique. The issue always has to be, is anything that I'm cloaking myself with a technique damaging my emotional capacity to connect to the feeling in the story and give that back organically and truthfully. So, for example, actors. Now you'll see why I didn't want to act too. I give you an example. If an actor says, if it's dramatic, and the actor says, "Oh, I really don't think I can live here anymore," I often will say, "Okay, feel that, feel it, right? What do you feel? You feel anxious. You feel you don't like yourself. You feel terrible. You feel hateful. You feel you are angry. Fine, feel all those things, but don't help me vocally." And often what I'll get, which is so much more truthful. And again, not to fetishize it. And if I give you an example, you're going to get a bad actor doing it. But I'll often say to them, don't help me, less voice. And then I'll get something like, I hate being here. I hate it. I just don't want to be here anymore.
So it drops right in, and the listener has to come to you
Yes,
to meet you in that
yes,
place.
yes.
Yeah.
So what happens is that if the actor is deprived of using their voice, that often is a good way to get them connected to what's inside of them. It doesn't necessarily have to be that low volume, and especially if it says she yelled, great. As long as you own it, as long as you're there emotionally, you could say, "Hate your guts." That's fine. That works if that's what the script says. But too often, I just got a lot of volume and a lot of voice.
Yeah, let's talk
So
about
it's
this.
that.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, the voice can't act. That
You
is
know that.
something you say all the time. And there is this misconception, not just from audiobook listeners, but from audiobook narrators and voice actors, that being a voice actor or a narrator is all about having a fantastic voice. Oh, you've got a great voice. You should do
Absolutely.
voiceover. You've got a great voice. You should be an audiobook narrator.
Yeah. Um, if you put some of the most talented actors in a room with 50 other people and they all were talking, it might be very difficult to identify who the actor is. And yes, some of them have wonderful voices,
Yeah.
especially voiceover people. But at the end of the day, the voice makes sound. It simply cannot act. It doesn't. The acting is all inside. It all comes from within. And so what I think the actor, whether it's film, television, audiobook world, wants is that they want the subtext to direct them, not them direct it. And when the
Mm.
actor directs the subtext, it means they're helping it, they're overdoing it, they're using their voice to affect character or emotion, and it's not believable. It doesn't feel real. And that's what listeners want. They want to feel as though, I approach acting very reductively. At its core, I don't think it's complicated. It may be hard to do, but it's not complicated to talk about. Um, and so, I find that a lot of times actors do complicate it by thinking, well, I gotta underline all the words I'm going to emphasize. And I say, don't do that. So if you underline the words you're going to emphasize, you're going to see it as you're narrating. Or even if you do it in a play or a movie or whatever, if you think, I got to emphasize this and I got to emphasize that, you're aware of it. That means you're in your head. If you're connected emotionally, that subtext is going to direct you to emphasize whatever you want to emphasize, however you want to do it. And it's going to sound so much more authentic and real. In my
Yeah.
opinion.
So we're talking about a vocabulary that actors understand.
Yes.
What about when you're working with somebody who is not an actor and is never going to be an actor? So
Oh,
you've done a lot of books with politicians, defense secretaries,
yes.
senators,
Oh,
nonfiction authors who are not actors. What's
yes.
your approach then?
Okay, so I'll give you my favorite story, and then that will suggest what my approach is. But you're quite right. If I say to a non-actor, I often will say this to actors too. If I say, now, don't help me, okay? Do you know what I mean? Yes, yes, I know. If I say that to an author, don't help me, all right? No idea what I'm talking about. So that vocabulary works with an actor. If I say to an actor, um, uh, here's a very dramatic paragraph, and you narrated it fairly quickly. I say, let it take you an hour to get through those 3 sentences. they know exactly what that means. They know what that means. You know what that means?
Yeah.
That means what happens is that they begin to give themselves enough time to inhabit the feeling, play the and actually play the silent spaces. That's where all the drama is.
Ooh, I want to ask you about that, because I remember the first time I ever met you and I heard you speak, long before we were dear friends. You said, I want to feel what's happening in the white space. It's
Yes,
not just about the words. It's not just about what's being said. It's about what's not being said. So
correct.
listen to that.
Yes, and so again, if I say to you, if I was say to you, so Tess, why don't we get out? Why don't we go outside and have a conversation about podcasting? Okay, so you can tell that. Okay, so what if I said, so Tess, why don't we go outside and have a conversation about podcasting? You hear all the space, you hear all that. So the listener will stay with that because they can feel the emotional intent. If you blow through it, no chance to feel that. And that's where all the drama is. That's where
Yes, it's like, wait a second, what does he really want to talk to me about?
it,
What's going on? How does
yes.
this person's angry with me? Or yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I can get back to, if you want me to the author.
No, I
Authors,
totally do, but I want to ask you one more thing before we get to
okay.
that, just so that I don't lose it, because it's just so important. This theme of listeners listening to fiction books on double speed or 1.6, or where basically you're taking out that space that
Yeah,
that is so important for understanding and bringing the story to life. I don't understand it. I find it really frustrating. How do you feel about
I
that?
would too. So again, in terms of, looking at performance in a particular kind of reductive fashion, at the end of the day, if somebody could say to me, "Yeah, listen to this book at slightly higher speed," and you know what, I was every bit as emotionally connected to it as if I'd listened to it at normal pace, I wouldn't believe them.
No, I wouldn't either.
So if your outcome as a listener is to get it over with, right? If your outcome as a listener is to be connected and to be carried on a little magic carpet ride, then I think you want to listen to it in real time. And
I
that
think it brings up something about modern culture, though, doesn't it? Where we're just on to the next thing, on to the next thing. We're not truly dropping into the experience. We're almost having a facsimile of an experience. You go to a concert and everybody's got their phones up recording that they were there so they can put on their Instagram or their TikTok that they were there for their friends, but not actually putting it into their bodies,
I
enjoying the present moment. I find it problematic, to say the least.
I
But
do
yeah,
too.
it's just it's an interesting. Anyway, we could have a whole other conversation about that.
Sure.
But yeah, I find that a particularly compelling line of inquiry, just on a
I do
personal
too. I
level.
do think, as I said, if you're a consumer and you listen to audiobooks because you want to get through them, if it's a 10-hour audiobook and you think, "Oh man, I've got 7 hours, I gotta get through this thing." Okay, but
Yeah,
you said that maybe that's just simply a byproduct that tells us more about who we are uh,
yeah,
as a culture, etc.
yeah,
And that we
yeah.
don't have time to feel.
Yes.
Don't have time to feel. Got to get going.
Yeah, gosh. I mean, it is. Look, you have to bring your vulnerability into the booth as a narrator.
Yes, you do.
You've got to bring you as an actor. You have to bring you and the full you, and that takes courage. And I
You
think as a listener, to connect and go to these dark places, vulnerable places, exposing places, it is that conundrum, right? We want to be seen as humans, but we
yeah.
don't want to be exposed.
No.
And
Well,
there's a
you just
fine line between being seen and then feeling
you,
exposed.
you just answered why authors are a completely different experience than actors. You
Oh, tell me. Okay, let's go. Let's find our way into it that way
seriously,
then.
okay, and I think you'll see it in the anecdote real quick.
Yeah.
You don't. I can explain it maybe a little bit more. So I worked with a woman named Elif Batuman who writes literary fiction. Her stuff is very good. I mean, you like it, you don't like it, but it's literary fiction. It's not silly. It's not, just crank it out. So she insisted on reading her own fiction, and this is a dramatic story. So I
Which is
No,
actually quite rare, isn't
it is.
it, for an author to read their own fiction
Yes,
novel?
most of them have.
Non-fiction, very common, but
Yes,
fiction, not
yeah,
common.
no,
Yeah.
most of them have common sense.
Yeah.
P.S. The nonfiction authors, they shouldn't read their own work either. But I understand why publishers want the actual celebrity or whoever it is to read it. This woman is narrating her stuff, and she says to me, "Please help me. You can direct me. I have no problem. I want you to help me as much as you can." Okay. So I listened to her. So after 3 words, as she begins, I'm thinking 3 words. I know. Okay, this woman, yeah, not an actor. It's pointless. She goes on and on. She said, "Now, Paul, you haven't said much, but you please help me." So I didn't say too much for about the first couple of hours. And then I said a couple of things.
A couple of hours for you? I don't believe that.
Well, there was I could say things, but I couldn't really help her. So anyway, the next day we were buddies, and she said, you really can help me. I said, okay. So she started again, and she had to narrate a very kind of emotionally consequential scene between a young man and a young woman, and it was evident that they were going to have an affair or whatever it was, but it was very high stakes and tense. And I said to her, "So, Elif," I said, "how do these people feel about one another?" "Oh, I said, "Well," I said, "Okay, so how?" Uh, on a scale of 1 to 10, I said, how give me a number that tells me how committed you are to replicating how they feel about one another.
Oh.
And she said, "Well, I don't know, a couple." I said, "Okay." I said, "So I want you to do this. I want you to imagine that you're this woman whose point of view it's from, and you really want this person very badly, like right now. That's what's going on in this scene, right? And so dig down. Maybe you can recall something like that in your own life that gets you there." I said, "See what you think." And you know what she said to me? "Oh, I couldn't do that." That was it. That was the end. She couldn't do it. I said, "Great, no problem."
At least that's honest.
Off we go. Yeah. So that's it. So the point is that
Wow.
that's not what authors do for a living. And that's
Yeah.
why an author that often may think, "Well, it's my book. I wrote it. How can anybody know it better than me?" That author may be correct to the degree that intellectually they can talk about it in a
Mm.
way that is far more informative than me. That said, acting is what I tell actors is acting is 100% emotional contact with the subtext, 0% intellect. Zero.
I mean, the minute you get inside your own head, you're gone. You're
Forget,
dead as an
that
actor. Yeah. Yeah,
soon as you
absolutely.
intellectual, that's why I like to approach acting reductively. I don't want to talk about it with the actor, not while we're working. I could talk about it, if we're sitting
Mm,
around a table like I am now, but
mm.
not while we're working. And sometimes they'll want to talk about, well, I say, it's okay, it's okay. Just try this, try this, try this. And
Let me ask
I,
you about giving up as opposed to continuing to ride somebody, because you are tough,
yeah,
and I mean that in the best possible way. That Paula always says great actors want to be ridden like stallions.
I
And they
think
really, really do,
I
and
think,
until they don't, right? Until they find it really
well,
confronting. You keep stopping me. I'm so frustrated. I'm losing my momentum. Well, we've talked about this. It can be a very
yeah,
frustrating experience. It's, making art is hard. It can be a really grueling but
yeah.
exhilarating process.
Now,
And to really get somewhere is it can be really confronting.
it can be. And in fairness, I would not push an actor to the degree where it upset them so much that it would be counterproductive. So I wouldn't do that. That said, actors are ready to go there. And so what usually occurs when I'm pushing them is I'm telling them, look at the stakes, look at the stakes. On a scale of 1 to 10, look at the stakes. Go there. You can go there, go there, go there. And what's very counterintuitive often is that actors, when they think they have to go there, they want to get bigger, louder, they want to help it. And then I have to say to them, right, feel it. Don't help me. Don't help me. Don't help me vocally. You don't even have to emphasize anything. You have to feel it. And if you feel it, I guarantee you the emphasis will come there. It may come
Well,
out
the other
different.
piece of it too is we also have to leave space for the listener and the audience to fill in their part of it and do the rest of the work. We do it with our imagination. When we're not shown, we can then feel like we're part of it and that we're creating this thing together. And there's something very magical about that.
100%. I do think that that I imagine sort of a horse and buggy to the degree that the listener wants to be ahead. The listener doesn't want to be led. If they're led, then you're doing all the work for them. And I think that removes them aesthetically, it removes them emotionally. They want to feel like they're actually on the battlefield ready to get blown up.
Yes. So I interviewed Jess Taylor in the previous episode about story, and he was saying exactly that our instinct is always ahead of our intellectual processing. And
Yes,
speaking to that when we're immersed in a great story, we can't help but anticipate.
of
And you
course.
actually want to be catching the wave together and
Yeah.
being in that flow together.
But when we anticipate, that's the right word, because anticipate means we don't know. So if the
Yes.
actor is helping you, you do know, and you don't want it. So if the
Yes.
actor said this, I I approached the corner and I knew there was something terrible right up. You know,
Yes.
I'm obviously exaggerating. Well, so now, what is the listener supposed to do? There's nothing for the listener to anticipate. The listener's saying, "All right, okay, I get it. I know there's a bad person behind there. You walked
Yeah.
me into it."
Yeah. It's like showing the close up of the person that's behind the corner.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's the bottom line. That is you're saying it, I think, from my perspective, precisely accurately, that the listener wants to be the one that's anticipating what they don't know. They don't want to be helped. They don't want the actor to help them, to lead them,
Yeah.
to get them.
Some of the great narrators have said to me, obviously we're mutual friends with a lot of these people, have
Sure.
said to me, working with Paul Ruben was the hardest, most frustrating, most exhilarating, thrilling thing I've ever done. I don't know if I can go back to self-recording in my booth now.
No, but
Because so many, narrators now are recording in their booths by themselves, directing themselves. They have absolutely no help with performance, which I do not agree with. I've never recorded or done a job without a director ever in my life before, and I don't know if I ever want to, because it's such a glorious process. And I need a director as an actor or as a
of
performer.
course.
So, how do you feel about this trend of actors directing themselves?
Well, here's what I think is a byproduct of that. I think most people, whether you're an actor or not, know the expression "phoning it in," and so
Oh, let's talk about phoning it in.
phoning it in. And I've thought about this. You do have to be an actor to really phone it in well. There's almost
Let's
the
talk about what your definition of phoning it
I,
in
I
for
will.
listeners who are not in the acting world and don't have any idea what
Phoning
that
it
expression
in,
means.
phoning it in is indicating feeling without really feeling it. But you do it at kind of a high level. So the high level means that you indicate it pretty well, pretty smoothly. You sound almost slick. Tess walked in the room and she really felt nervous today. Really nervous. That's all phoned in, right? Tess walked
Yeah.
in. She thought, this is my first podcast, and I thought I was going to feel really fine and good and everything, but I don't really feel good. It's you could do that in your sleep. That
Yeah. And a lot of narrators are doing it.
means that and the way to know that you're phoning it in is if you stop the narrator and say, "Do you feel anything right now?" The answer will be, "Yes, I'm hungry and it's time for lunch."
Yeah.
That's it. So that's essentially phoning it in. And I think in the booth, working by yourself, and I'm not blaming the actor necessarily, it's very, very difficult given the program is due quickly. I got to I gotta hurry up and do this. I don't have anybody to help me. And then they more and more rely on their voice, more and more rely on simply, as I said, indicating the feeling, showing the feeling without feeling it. And
Let's
then
talk about some of the bad habits, because that's one bad habit,
that's a real,
is phoning it in. And there's several others. So one of the ones that, well, actually, I'm going to let you tell me, and then I'm going to add in one that I think is, you
sure.
might name it too, the one that I think is the most frustrating.
So for me, a bad habit, again, if I look at the essence of a bad habit, what's the outcome? The outcome of a bad habit is that it disconnects me emotionally from the story. That's it, period. So here's a bad habit. Narrators, if I tell the narrator, um, as you tell this story, right, you are attempting to replicate real life, correct? Yeah, I am. Okay, so we agree on that. Now I know as soon as they say that, they're not going to do it. I can just, tell. So now they're going to narrate the story, and they decide that not only are they going to narrate it in a or they decide that the particular way they're going to narrate it is to modulate their voice, and so they're going to say, Tess walked in the room and she sat down on the chair. Now, I'll usually stop to somebody and say, have you ever said and that way in your life without owning it? Just sung it like that? And so the answer to that is if I tell them, don't sing, okay? That often will correct that. And so for me, that is one of the, and it happens more in nonfiction than fiction, but it happens all over the place, right? And so it's important for the actor to know what the emotional consequence or lack thereof is when they modulate their voice. And so the explanation is the following, from my perspective. When you watch the news on television, the news reporter may modulate their voice. They may say, last week in Melbourne, 5 people were killed in a very unfortunate accident. That is because that narrator does not want, that news reporter does not want, their outcome is not to have you, Tess, connect emotionally to what they're saying to the degree that it impacts you so much you can't listen to the news anymore. Now you might, but that's not their outcome. If it
Yes.
was their outcome, they would say, oh, last week in Melbourne, 5 people were killed. Why don't you know?
Yeah.
So that's the difference between the outcome, and that's why the sort of the modulating the voice is simply removes the listener or the viewer or whoever it is emotionally from the experience.
Yeah, well, I was not going to use that particular language, but I was going to say exactly the same thing of getting
Yes,
into
that I think is one of the
the
worst.
same patterns and sing-songy
Yeah.
rhythms where you're just speaking things in a really beautiful way, but it's not really
Yeah.
connected to
The
anything.
other things that bother me, or not, I don't want to say bother me, that I think are disconnecting are things like pushing and helping. So if I had a nickel for every time I said to the narrator, don't push, don't push. A push means what it sounds like. Tess came in the room yesterday. Why are you using your voice to affect a feeling? Just feel it. And for the actor, sometimes they think, well, okay, but don't I have to sound that way? I say, no, you will sound that way. The listener will believe you. I want you to respect your listener, respect your viewer, respect them. If you're emotionally connected, they'll buy it, right?
Oh, let's
So
talk about that respect, because
yeah,
it does fall into the showing, helping, is that we are assuming that the listener is stupid and isn't going to get there on their own. And
yes,
again, I was speaking to Jess about this in the last episode about how that story is built as much by omission as it is inclusion,
yes,
and that the great books and great movies, it's as much about what we're not told, and we are going to get
right.
there. We're going to get there. We're so much smarter than as we're creating art than we think someone is. So I really appreciate what you're saying about respect, is
Well,
assuming that the listener is really smart and they're right there with you.
so I'll give you my feeling about that. I'll give that a lot of actors don't get up in the morning and say, "Oh my God, I got to narrate this for a bunch of morons." Okay, so I know they're not saying that to them. That here's the way I think about it. A person can be intellectually, have varying degrees of intellect. However, the actor's project is not the intellect. That's the author's project, whoever wrote the book or the script, not the actor. You can't act the words. Intellect is not actable. The words are not actable. If I said to you, Tess, act, I'm going to the store right now, act that, what would you do? You would have to intuit a feeling, and that's what would propel you to say the line. If I don't tell you the feeling, what are you going to do? So here's where all listeners, whether they have 9 PhDs or, they're just woke up in the morning and their teeth are missing and they got to go out and, work the fields. And maybe they haven't gone to college or whatever. They all intuitively relate to happy, sad, angry, frustrated, etc. So we are all essentially in the same pot emotionally, if you know what I'm saying.
We're all having a human experience.
That's it. And so the actor's project has nothing to do with the intellect of the listener or the viewer, for that matter. That's why I tell actors too, yes, if you're narrating literary fiction, a Pulitzer Prize winning novel versus some silly romance, of course there is a huge difference in terms of literary. That said, for the actor, so what I say to them is the characters in the literary fiction and the characters in the kind of silly romance don't know that they're in a romance. They don't know that they're in a literary fiction. In most cases,
Yes.
they're just experiencing life. So for them, it's all Shakespeare. The stakes are very high. So you don't have to worry about the literary quality of what you're doing. I get it, of course. That said, it has zero to do with acting, zero. And in fact, literary fiction can be more problematic for me as a director because sometimes the subtext is buried to the degree where we, meaning the actor and I, have to figure out, now what's the feeling here? What is it? As opposed to, "I hate you," she said angrily. And so viewers need to be respected to the degree that it's all on you, the actor. If you can connect the subtext to the listener or the viewer in a way that is truthful, organically, emotionally connected, of course, people like things more than others, but you will connect to them. They will get it. Most people, when they walk out of a movie or listen to an audiobook, if they say, "I don't like it," if they're talking about the content, fine. If they're talking about the performance, they don't mean "I don't like it." Like is a non-actable word. What they mean is, it didn't connect to me. I'm not connected.
I didn't believe it. Yeah.
I didn't believe it. It didn't impact me emotionally. And if they didn't believe it, that's on the actor. Probably. Maybe not. I mean, you can have multiple views. I don't want to sound,
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying.
At the end of the day, again, it's not that complicated. You either emotionally connect to your listener or viewer 100% of the time, or you don't. If you don't, how much don't you? And then where does that take you? If you're an actor, why are you an actor? What is it that you're exactly, what is it that you bring to the party if you're not going to use what's inside of you to connect to the feeling and as you said earlier, be vulnerable and connect yourself? And yeah, it is very vulnerable. That's why Elif Batuman said, I can't do that. But she's not an actor.
Let me ask you about that. So you you're really in there with an actor, particularly a great actor. Great directors want to work with great actors who want to be there, and they're willing actors, and they want to participate in this collaborative process. And then with Ella, you knew, okay, not going to go there, not going to happen. I'm here to just basically be a technical director and take this where I can. So I want to ask you about a story. You've told me many stories in our long friendship, but the one that's really stuck with me was the story you told me about working with Michael J. Fox and how you decided to pull back. And it was one of the greatest teachable moments for you as a director. So can you share that story?
I absolutely will. So it's been some years now, well over 10 years ago. I worked with Michael J. Fox on a book called Always Looking Up. It won a Grammy Award, so it was very gratifying that way. So his coterie of people that came with him said, don't push him, leave him alone. He's obviously, he can't even narrate that long. Be careful, just treat him with kid gloves and whatever. So I said, all right. So I pretty much let him go and said almost nothing to him. The recording lasted about 10 days because he could only work for a couple of hours at a time. I couldn't work all 10 days. And I said to Paula, I said to the publisher, can Paula do some of these days because she can do them and I just can't? The publisher said, fine. They knew Paula, great, no problem. So Paula goes in there to work with Michael J. Fox. And apparently she didn't get the email or didn't get the whatever.
I'm not sure if she would have listened to it anyway.
So she's like telling him, yeah, try this again, or let's do this, let's do that, whatever, and she's directing him. So at the end of the program, when he was all done, Paula was there. She and I were both there to say goodbye to him, and a couple of other people were there. And he walked up. I thought he was walking up to me. And so he's walking this way, takes a little bit of a left, extends his hand. Paula shakes his hand and says, thank you for directing me. And I thought,
yeah,
I didn't say to myself, there's a teachable moment, but I'm getting goosebumps right now because there was a teachable moment.
yeah.
He's an actor.
He wanted to be ridden like a stallion, as she
Wanted to
said.
be directed. Yeah. And I understand the concern. Paula didn't badger him, drive him crazy. If Paula did, he would have reacted. She directed him. And I think that, my experience with celebrities like that is sometimes you can work with them and sometimes you can't. When you can, it's a magical experience. Can I tell you about the one celebrity, my favorite, who I worked with for all time?
Please. Because you've worked with a ton. I mean, you're going to just pick one?
Right there, So this has got to be 20 years ago now. Random House was doing a book with Lynn Redgrave, and I found out about it. It was in California, and this was the days before the internet, and so you had to travel out there. So I asked them. I said, "Look, can I do this?" And they said, "Well, no, it's in California. We got to hire somebody out there." I said, "Look, I'll pay my way. I'll pay everything. I'll pay you. I'll pay her."
Yes, seriously, to work with her? Oh, I would have done the
So
same
they
thing.
said, "Oh, all right, you have to pay your plane fare, pay your hotel." I said, "Okay, I will. I'll stay an extra night. I'll do anything." So I went out there, and the very first thing she said to me was, the very first thing she said was, "Do you know the proper way to make tea?" And I said, I, she said, "Well, I'm going to show you because we're going to have some. And I'll show you." So she showed me how to boil the water, make it get all bubbly and boily, and leave the tea bag in there and all this stuff and all this. And she said, you can't. So if the water's not bubbly, you can't pour it. Okay. And then she started to work, and I thought to myself, all right, let's see what happens. I mean, she's a phenomenal actress, but I asked her to basically do something over, and she said, "Oh, of course, yes, yes, absolutely." So that was very validating for me. Very validating to have an actor who was just that talented and so on and so forth to treat me simply as a director and not leverage her celebrity, which unfortunately happens with some celebrities whose names I won't mention, but whose initials might be Johnny Depp, for example. And so yeah, it was just impossible for me to. He's sitting in the booth, in this booth in England where I had to go, smoking cigarettes and being just, uncommunicative. So it was very difficult for me to work with him, and then he would come out of the booth and say disparaging things about audiobooks, about whatever. So I mean, I'm not sure how much.
Wasn't that the only time you've actually said, I can't do this?
Uh, well, the short answer is yes, although in fairness, it was evident to me that it was going to take him longer than what the publisher wanted. And I think if all things being equal, if he was actually being cooperative, they would have continued the program. But I told them it's going to take forever to finish this. And it's, if you want me to do it, I'll do it. But, you can only take so many bullet holes. And then you think they were great. So they
Yeah, soul-crushing work is just not worth it.
No, it's not. But I've had great experiences with my other.
So I mean, Meryl Streep, for example, that was glorious, right?
It was, yes. I mean, I worked with her. She came in, and it's funny. First thing I realized, no, she's not 7 feet tall. She's actually.
I know. We all imagine her to be a titan.
She couldn't have been nicer. She sat in the booth. She narrated. She was great. I mean, I didn't have to tell her a million things and all this, but it was very validating. It was quite wonderful. I had that experience. I loved working with Tony Roberts.
Oh yeah.
Same thing. Wonderful. My favorite.
But I mean, the very first audiobook that you narrated was with Stacy Keach, right?
Well, yes. That takes me into how did I get into audiobook world, and if you want me, I'll tell you.
Please.
Now. Okay. So, I'd been a director before that. I knew somebody that worked for Simon and Schuster, and this was long ago, before the changing of the century. And they said to me, well, we're using some celebrities. We're working with celebrities, but we need a director actually to work with them, because is that something that you feel comfortable doing? And I said, yes, yeah, sure. I've directed some celebrities in plays and this and that. And they said, okay. And they said, and tell me what's your audiobook experience? What audiobooks have you done? And I said, oh, I said, well, and so I go into the recording studio and I see the engineer sitting with the equipment with 47,000 light bulbs on it and all this stuff, and thinking, oh my God, please pray. I hope he knows what he's doing, because I haven't got a clue about any of this. But Stacy Keach is a wonderful actor. We hit it off. He took direction. He was wonderful. I had a great time. And that's how I got into audiobook world.
So why was Lynn Redgrave the favorite experience that you chose, besides learning how to make a great cup of tea?
I think because she, with various celebrities, my experience is sometimes there's if you're lucky, a kind of a warm-up period where they somehow, I don't want to get in their heads, but it feels a little uncomfortable. They have to think maybe that I know what I'm doing, or there's a little, or they think, don't tell me any, whatever. I walked in and I barely sat down, and Lynn Redgrave was talking to me like we, knew each other for 1,000 years. And by the way, I'll show you.
Oh, so you just had that instant rapport.
Well, I felt respected by her instantly. I felt okay. It's up to me to do something silly and show her that I don't know what I'm doing, but she's not going to make that assumption. And I think most people, I'm assuming many people, have some experiences where if you say something in a way that kind of leverages who you are, and you don't really have that leverage, and they call you on it, you can kind of imagine yourself with egg coming down your face.
Oh, yeah.
That's never happened to me, and I don't want to go there. So I'm always pretty careful. I had the same experience with Burt Reynolds when I worked with him. It just couldn't have been more fun. And I had to go to his home and work with him. And he came and he talked to me like we were best buddies. And at the time, this is a long time ago, my son was in high school and I knew Burt Reynolds played football. So I showed him a photograph of my son in a uniform, and I said to him, "You only wished you looked like this, right?" You know, he was all over it. So we hit it off. So that was great. So those are my good
Yes.
experiences.
Yeah. So speaking about making assumptions, I want to ask you about this because you have directed people where they're very high profile political figures, for example. So when you directed Mitch McConnell, for example, you flew out there, your politics could not be more opposite, you know, in your belief system. And then you ended up having a really pleasant experience with him as a human being. And the reason I pulled that story out right now, or recollect them out of the treasure trove of stories you've told me and the people that you've worked with, is that in this current climate where we're so divided, that at the end of the day, we're all having a human experience and we can find common ground if we don't make assumptions about each other. So you went there to direct his book. And tell me about what happened in terms of forging a connection with somebody that you may have assumed you weren't going to be able to do.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying. I think that I walked in there and was able to sort of disaggregate my judgment about his politics from my feelings about what it will be like simply to help him. Because
Okay,
really,
so that was your intention when you went in there.
my intention was to walk in there and do my best to help him narrate his book as best he could. And he, in turn, I think, responded to that. I'm sure he took one look at me and thought, yeah, I know. You know, this guy's some lefty from, Brooklyn. That said, and maybe he didn't. That said, he allowed me to work with him, and then he in turn was very giving with me, and he sat down and had lunch with me 2 feet from me, and we had a very good time. So I think what occurred, and to pick up on what you suggested was, um, it, it's always instructive and informative to think about what we do have in common as opposed to what we don't have in common.
But it sounds like, and correct me if I'm misinterpreting this, but it sounds like he coat checked his ego at the door and just met another human being in the collaborative process. And maybe he was nervous and wanted your help. I mean, who knows? We don't know, right? What is it like? Yeah. Is that a correct assumption?
100%.
Yeah. Okay. So, what is it like for you to work with somebody who chooses not to do that? Because you have worked with some very powerful, very high profile figures. What is that like for you?
I'm sure my experience replicates people in business all over the place. So he's no longer with us, but Ash Carter was, this is the most recent, a few years ago, the Obama's Secretary of Defense. This man was at the time in charge of a agency pushing $1 trillion, the Defense Department. He was in Boston and I'm in New York, so we're working remotely. And I can't see him. I'm hearing him fine, but I don't see him. So all he does is hear this voice. And I could tell just in listening to him talk to the engineer that he was a little nervous. And perhaps if I had thought through this a little bit more, although it was fine, I might have approached things a little differently because I do have a strategy for people like that. So he reads the very first sentence, and I already can tell, oh my God, this poor man can't read very well. He makes a lot of mistakes. He changes words. I know that publishers will allow him to change multiple words if they don't really impact the meaning. But the first sentence was something like, in 1974, he said in 1497. So I can't let that go.
Yeah.
So I let him finish the sentence and I said, Secretary Carter, what? And
Oh, wow. Okay.
I thought, okay. So what occurs in here now is, from my perspective, this whole notion of leverage. I, of course, have to be the grown up in the room, calmed myself down, or I was fine, but I mean, calming. And I did gently tell him that I said, can we go back and can you narrate the sentence that says in 1974? Make sure he heard me say 1974. And he did get it right. And then after that, when I had to stop him, then you always have to find a MacGuffin, a bad guy. So I always make the studio the bad guy. And I said, oh, Secretary Carter, there was a noise. Or, oh, Secretary Carter, maybe that was a car outside, which of course is all baloney. That he could relate to. I don't think he saw that as an assault on him. And so he was more predisposed to not have an outburst. And then as time went by, I had to work with him 4 more times. And I've had this experience too. As he got calmer and a little more, I think, in control, he felt less threatened. So I'm making that up, but that's my experience. And then it was okay. He was all right. And it reminds me that all people are human, whether it's him or
he was
you
just
or me.
nervous. He wasn't in a
Just
comfortable
nervous.
domain.
And
Yeah.
sure, and maybe he thought, "Who is this pipsqueak telling me all this stuff that I can't even? Who do you think
Yeah.
you are?"
Well, I'm
That
going to tell you, his wife is a friend of mine, and I know
I
he's a lovely
know,
person. I
you
know
know,
he's a lovely person. So it really would have been that he was just nervous. So,
that
you know what I mean? Isn't that interesting where it's funny, I'm going to butcher this because I can't remember the exact quote, but I remember somebody saying once, when you're in a great partnership with somebody, um, on my worst day, you invite me and you remember me on my best day.
yeah,
And I think it's just it's a really great example of this story that you're telling. You spoke a minute ago about that you've got some strategies about working with people when they're nervous. So what are some of the others? You sort of, through the anecdote you were sharing some of them. What are some of the
yeah. Well,
others?
this is just me, my strategy. I didn't read a book on strategies about working with people when they're nervous. This is just what occurs to me as I've moved through my time. At the end of the day, I'm always mindful of the fact that this is a human being in there with the same feelings that I have: happy, sad, angry, etc. And if that person happens to be the Secretary of Defense, state, whoever he is or she is, doesn't matter. They all have, we are all have that commonality. Additionally, I always feel that my first obligation is to be sure, if I need to, that that person understands that I have the utmost respect for them and that I am committed to essentially helping them. And the way that I do that is I just simply say, "Oh, Tess, that was great. That was very good, good, great. What if I can do it? So can we just go back? But it's great. It's wonderful." And then I'll slowly inject what it is I need them to do. I have never in my life ever had somebody tell me, "Don't tell me I'm great. I'm not great. I know I'm not great." Never, never. And I think I think maybe it's because I actually mean it. It, because I don't think I need to refer to a hierarchy of good or bad or great. I recognize that a person is nervous. And so in that sense, the bar changes or that there's some difference. So I'm allowed to say to them, "That was great. That was great." And if somebody wants to say to me, "No, that wasn't great," then I'll tell them, "Go yourself, whatever."
Yeah.
Right? I can say whatever I want. That my outcome is to make that person comfortable, and I need to acknowledge that person, but sincerely, not fakey. So I mean
Yeah.
it.
So you keep bringing up this word acknowledge and acknowledgement and you needing that acknowledgement. So you said winning a Grammy with Michael J. Fox was gratifying. You also won a Grammy, with Al Franken for his book. Does that matter to you? What does that feel like? Do you care about that?
The short answer is yes, to the degree that I recognize it as simply I've been around a long time. It feels as though it's nice to be recognized with an award like that. Do I take it a little bit with a grain of salt? Sure, because there's a whole lot of other things, other wheels that are spinning that create these outcomes. I mean, Grammy Best Spoken Word, for example, the Grammy
It
Award.
always goes to a celebrity.
It always goes to a
Like,
celebrity.
it's never going to go to a non-celebrity who might just have done the most incredible job at a book.
I get all those things. So yeah, so that's fine. And my feeling, and when I tell narrators too about awards, if they're asking me if it comes up, is I say, hey, if I get an award for something, that's fabulous. If I don't, then those people don't know what they're talking about. They don't know and then you kind of move on from there. I'm far more invested in I think my sense of acknowledging the people I work with, and far more appreciative of the acknowledgement that I receive for them. It's possible that an actor would say to me, "Oh boy, Paul, it was great working with you," when they don't mean it. Yeah, they have nothing to benefit by doing that. So, and we all know, because I'll always say to let me see if I can explain this. So what's so and this is where the acknowledgement comes from. Um, when something occurs when I'm working with an actor, and let's say we are working on something together, and the actor finally gets there, we may stop, or at some point when we stop, I'll say, you felt that, didn't you? You felt it. And the actor will say, yeah, I did. I felt it. I couldn't ask for any more acknowledgement than that.
Oh, so you're a surfer, so catching the wave is the thrill for
That's
you.
my outcome, is for them to
Yeah.
feel it and say, meaning I felt it and I couldn't have felt it more. I mean, I did it. It was organic. I felt it. And the key for me always, as I think about these things, and I say it to the actors too, is when you're connected in the moment, organically there, when you're giving back what the text is giving you emotionally, all the nuanced choices you make could not, if we had to do this over again, I could never direct you to do it the same way.
Yes.
It's all kinetic. It's all spur of the moment. It's all dictated by the subtext pushing them. And that's why I think acting in a particular way defies language. You do the best you can.
Yeah.
And that's why, for me, I've found that actable directions, the actual syntax of the actable direction, doesn't really even mean anything. And yet, if I say, let it take you an hour to get through these 3 sentences, well, the actual syntax is telling them to take an hour. They intuitively know that's not what I mean. They know what we talked about earlier, that they need to honor the space, I'll use this word, let it breathe. That's a silly word, but experience the feeling in the white space that propels you to say the next sentence. And it always occurs to me when those things happen, and that I do buy into. So if a listener who's not an actor is listening to this and they want to really do well at a cocktail party, they can say to the friend or whoever they're talking to, so fill in the blank. Acting is blank. What will they say? What will the friend say? I don't know. Acting is reacting. If you don't react, you're not acting. You can't. If you don't react, acting's impossible. That's French for impossible.
Yeah.
And can't do it.
What about teaching? What do you love about that? Because you teach a lot now.
I
You
do.
teach narrators. You coach people as well as directing.
I do. I think what I enjoy the most about coaching and teaching is, because this is what happens, I would say, the vast majority of time. If I'm working with an actor, I don't really teach non-actors, just because I prefer to send them to somebody else who can maybe help them a little more than I can. So if the person's an actor, what invariably happens is what I suggested earlier. The actor comes in cloaked with affect. 1, 2, 3, lots of affect, a little affect. And so what I enjoy is suggesting to the actor, okay, it's great, it's good. Okay, so I don't actually say this to them, but this is what I'm doing. let's disrobe you now. Let's take away the affect. Don't help me. Don't push. Don't sing. It's a lot of don'ts. And sometimes actors, I did have one actress say to me, "You're too negative." I'd say, "Oh, okay, I hear you." I say, "That said, you can use the word negative. If you don't have any clothes on, I won't be negative. I guarantee you. If you don't cloak yourself in affect, you won't hear a negative word out of me." So what I'm trying to do is suggest to the actor in the coaching session, your voice can't act. Don't help me. Don't sing. Don't modulate. However, and here's where I am positive. Is this where your feeling center is? Okay. So I'm going to suggest to you that you are likely to be challenged in terms of feeling the emotional consequence of the subtext if you're using your voice, if you're singing. If you deprive yourself of that affect, and you have a clear emotional path to connect to that feeling and give back what that feeling gives you. That's the essence of it. Does that make sense to you?
It makes complete sense to me as an actor. Yeah. I want to ask you about legacy because you got into audiobooks. You then created a company that you ran for 20 years, very successful before audiobooks were the huge things that they are now.
Yeah.
You had this real entrepreneurial spirit about you to do that and create this huge company and then sell it. What did you learn and what changed in the industry during that time, where you were really instrumental in helping build the industry that we have today? What does that matter to you? What does that feel like when I say that?
No, I hear you. I think honestly, so perhaps like many people, it's pretty presumptuous of me if I thought I was the only one, but obviously, like lots of people, various things that propel you can work simultaneously, can happen at the same time. I've always sort of had a kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, and I've always enjoyed producing, putting all the little parts together and making something happen. And in the beginning of audiobook world, I was really a producer. Now I'm more a director, but in the beginning, I often, sometimes I even hired the talent. I got the editor together. I got all the various parts together, and I enjoyed doing that. I like that. So that was enjoyable. I enjoyed the idea of having a company, and I do appreciate your asking the question because these questions, it's funny, do make me think like I'm sitting for the moment in front of a therapist, because it occurred to me that, again, that's all another form of acknowledgement for me. This is something I think I can do, and I don't have anybody telling me I can't do it as a child, or just dismissing it. So that was sort of my experience as a child, more that it was dismissed. Hey, I just did this, as though I was talking to the, outer space. So I think that was a piece of it also. And then after that, meaning with 20 years or so went by, I determined that I wanted to spend a little more time writing, and which is another passion. And I think if I was, I think I'm a good writer. I think if I was as good a writer as I am a director, I'd have whatever, a couple of whatevers, but I do think I'm a good writer. So
You are a good writer. Let me ask you about that and this acknowledgement piece. So you alluded to, well, not alluded, you expressed that you didn't get that acknowledgement from your dad. And that has been a driver for you, as it is for all of us. Our parents and our relationship with our parents drives our behavior, every human being. So it was that. I know you've been a writer for a really long time. You wrote plays, they were produced off Broadway. You wrote episode of Star Trek, you wrote TV, you wrote all kinds of things in your life. And you've been writing for a very, very, very long time. to then get really, really vulnerable and write these short stories about the relationship between father and son and put yourself in that place where you were drawing from your personal experience with your own father and your relationship with your son, with Brandon. What was that? It has to be me to go from writing fiction about stuff, people are, in outer space, for example, and then someone in a play, to writing something very, very personal, selling your business and going, this is actually what lights me on fire.
Well, if you use, again, it's very instructive to me. If you use the language, it's, how do you say, it's got to be me, or it has to
It
be me?
has to be me.
Yeah. So I think that's applicable to how I determined to write these short stories. I think that within me, there was a particular desire and need to find my way into my relationship with my dad earlier, and then with my son by way of fiction. And I think one of the things fiction can do is it too can replicate real life and real feelings if you decide that that's what you want to do. And so writing, I don't want to say that writing these short stories was cathartic. I don't think it changed me to a degree that I was this way before and now I'm this way after. Not at all. That said, it helped me explore feelings that I had, my son had, my father had, through various characters in various ways. So none of it is autobiographical. And in doing that, it helped me, I think, or informed me about me to the degree that was all predicated on the vocabulary. It has, how do you say it? It has to be
It
me.
has to be me.
It has to be me.
I love how you don't drop the name of the podcast into your body, right? Like you and I, like this is what I love about you, is that you are in the moment with me talking about this, processing it, which is exactly how you work as a director, So yeah, I catalog life in a series of it has to be me moments, which is why I named the podcast It Has to Be Me, right?
Well,
And I love us finding it in the moment in terms of where you drop it into your body.
well, I do too, and I appreciate it. That it has to be me. First of all, I thought to myself, okay, if it has to be me, oh my goodness, I don't want to say it has to be somebody else. I don't want to say it doesn't have to be me. It has to be me suggests to me that. So I'm going to just, this is sort of coming to me as I say it, but it has to be me suggests to me that there may be more to me than even I think there is, and whatever story I come up with that's that makes me feel more connected to who I am is a good one. Is makes me feel human, makes me feel connected and with you and myself at this moment.
Yeah.
So it's a very kind of, and interestingly, if I sort of now separate myself from that and look at me as a director, I would be, if I was the actor, saying to the actor whatever the dialogue was. If you made a transcript of this and the actor was saying just what I'm saying, I'd say to the actor, oh, so how does he feel? How does he feel? What's the feeling? Is he happy, sad, anxious, angry, wistful? Where's the feeling? What is it? And you can go there. You can go there. And then I rely on the actor to do a better job of to do that. So it's funny how it even informs me about directing and even talking about this. It's good.
Yeah, and it's just all connected, isn't it? A human
Yeah.
experience, your history, all of the different things you've done, writing, comedy,
Yeah.
directing, acting, teaching. I mean, it all just dovetails as it does for each and every one of us. going back to acknowledgement, and that would, it seems to be, not to not to analyze anything, but what I'm hearing is just acknowledgement. If you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to bloody do it. And that's a big driving factor for you. You are incredibly disciplined as a writer. So while you have this huge directing career, you had this huge producing career, you've been a business owner, you've been an actor, you've been a writer, you've done all these things, and you keep coming back to the writing. You write every single day in a disciplined fashion. You are the most disciplined person I have ever met. And you don't define yourself by age. You go to the gym every day. You are so strong. You've got more to give, and you know that you do. And you don't give up. The tenacity with which you attack life is something that I find so inspiring about you.
Right.
So tell me about continuing to write. You've just finished your second novel, and you are working in literary fiction.
I think
That's
so.
something that
The only person,
yeah.
the only person that's read it so far is my son, and I said it's a little different than the story collection. There's other sides of me. There's a little more humor in it, and it's not father and son, whatever. Um, but of course, acknowledgement is a huge theme in the book that I wrote. I would say the two main themes are acknowledgement and judgment, because the book focuses on a 22-year-old young lady and a 25-year-old guy, and she's has great. And the name of the book is Like, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. And she has a great difficulty with, especially in social media, being judged. She regards herself as too skinny, and she refers to herself as a pogo stick with tits that didn't mature during adolescence. So she's got all kinds of body images. So that said, now I've got to go back and remember your actual question to me, so I don't sound
No, I can ask it in a different way too, because it's just sort of, I'm finding my way into it as well. You chose to let Brandon read it first.
I did.
And I know that he is extraordinary, and he is a person you greatly admire. And I know you've said to me you think he's the smartest, greatest person on earth. We would all love our fathers to say that about
Hardest
us.
loving human being on the planet.
And he is extraordinary. Is your tenacity and your discipline of writing every day and continuing to write driven by that need to have acknowledgement in that space, in the same way that you've had high level acknowledgement in these other parts of your life?
I'm going to speak from my gut and say, not really. I of course I would like. I got some wonderful acknowledgement on the story collection. I got lots. I think that what the drive, because you alluded to it earlier, at my tender age, maybe I think the drive is simply that I, while I appreciate whatever intellect I have and whatever capacity I have to intellectually appreciate a given text or a given conversation from somebody, whatever, wherever I am there, I also very much, the who I am is wanting to be emotionally connected to my world and to the worlds that I want to inhabit. And so I want to inhabit the world of writing, and I want to inhabit the world of directing. And maybe it's more a need, probably is more a need than a want. And so it's that need, I think, that propels me. And I'm not old, but at my tender age of 78, I think to myself, well, I can still go to the gym 5 days a week. I can still do pull-ups. I can still do all these things. Nobody's figured out that I'm losing my mind, so I'm going to keep on going until that opportunity to keep on going doesn't exist anymore. And I do recall a book that I read while I was in college. It may have been, honestly don't recall who the author was. It may have been Camus, and it may have been The Stranger, but I can't exactly recall. But at the end of the day, the issue was, you know, how do you want to live? Do you want to live a long time? And the response was, just want to live well. And so that's how I feel. I want to live well.
Mm.
My definition of living well.
I'm thinking about something that I think it was Edith Wharton that said, I write to understand what I know. I don't write what I know. And it sounds to me like you're constellating around that same
Yes, much closer to that.
inquiry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's all
Yeah.
inquiry. I mean, you can have a character that thinks they know everything, but me as the writer, no. I'd be mortified if someone thought that what I wrote was didactic, that I was trying to use the fiction to grind a particularly didactic axe. And having said that, I don't think there's a fiction writer on the planet that doesn't have a particular axe to grind, meaning you have a need to get something out. You have a need to have characters express things that are in your mind. But no, I'm not telling everybody, you got to be a Democrat, you got to be a Republican, you got to be a Catholic, you know.
But it brings up, this larger thing that we've been constellating around, really, which is that story helps us understand ourselves. Creating story, we are finding our way into it and through it and with it in the moment. And that is what makes great acting exhilarating, is when you are finding it in the moment and you are behaving and with an intention and you are reacting to someone else's behavior and action.
Oh, well, yes, the two things that I do revolve around story, writing and audiobook work. And from my perspective, I look at audiobook narration as simply storytelling. That's it. The author's written a book, that's storytelling. All the actor is doing is saying it out loud. They're telling the story out loud. And yeah, they're reading the author's words, but that's okay. They are essentially, not essentially, they are telling a story to people who listen. And from my perspective, I have the feeling, although I've not looked at a text that told me this specifically, that that storytelling is endemic to human beings, that it has existed for all time, everywhere. And I think that, in my opinion, is a reason that storytelling is so much a part of human DNA is because storytelling helps us understand a world that essentially defies understanding, that doesn't make sense. And so when I was, there's a wonderful writer named Mircea Eliade who wrote about as much as he could about primordial people, way back. And he's looking at human beings that were among the first human beings to essentially think to themselves, wow, there's things that are happening that either I don't like or I'm afraid of or that don't want to happen to me. So I'm going to create a story that helps me understand these things. I'm going to create all kinds of gods and characters that will assist in me making my life a little bit better. And that's how you come by religion. All religion really is philosophy. It's all storytelling from my perspective. I don't want to, I don't want to contradict somebody who believes it's something else. From my perspective, religion is merely storytelling. It's all made up. And that's okay. Made up stories are good if they help you get through the day, so long as other people are not the beneficiaries of your made up story. And I think that becomes a problem. So we need stories. We need stories to figure out what is absurd, what doesn't make sense. I don't think there's a human being on the planet Earth today that if one said to that person, A, does the world make sense? They might, I don't know what their answer would be. But B, does the world make sense to you 100% of the time? And can you make sense out of the world 100% of the time? If that person says yes, I don't believe them.
Mm.
As Uncle Joe Biden, when he'd lean in and say, it doesn't make sense. He used to say to me, Joey, it doesn't make sense. You gotta
Oh, gosh.
help.
So, on that note, I always close every episode with the same question,
Yes.
which is when you have a dream in your heart and you don't feel like you have what it takes to make it happen, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
What do you say to yourself?
Yes. What I would say to myself is, as best I can, I'm going to deprive myself of a made-up construct that I just told myself, and I'm going to listen to who I am, to my feelings, and if my feelings are propelling me to do it, I'm going to do it, period. Best I can. I'm not at all suggesting the world isn't a tough place to be. That's how I would deal with it. That's how I do deal with it. Doesn't mean on a given day, at a given moment, I don't feel this, I don't feel that. That said, somehow I did manage to write this big long book. It's being copy edited right now. I'm determined to have it published. If I don't have it published, I'm determined to have it published. That said, if I don't, I think I can create for myself a believable story that tells me, so am I someone, is the definition of me a book that didn't get published? No. I look at my son and my daughter-in-law and my two grandbabies, I am reminded that that's not who I am. And when I think about Paula, my wife, who you interviewed and who I know you know and thinks more of you than probably me.
Oh, stop. Oh, my goodness.
But so we have a 4-year-old grandbaby, and Paula and the grandbaby are like this. And when I see them, I think to myself, right, there's mom, dad, Grammy, and everybody else. And I'm up there with everybody else. And I think, okay, that I can sit back and tell myself that's where the eggs are for me. And again, doesn't mean a whole host of mitigating issues don't occur, like all of us. So that's my answer. It has to emanate from here.
Mm.
And it always helps me to, I've mentioned it before, remind myself that a construct is okay, but once the construct becomes concretized, as if it's real, as if there's no way out of it, you can really F yourself up. Because you've built a box around yourself and deprived yourself of a way out. And my poor father has been departed now for 10 years, and he does serve sometimes to help me, remind me of certain things. And I can remember vividly over where he lived, and someone came to visit him who was a successful artist. And my father wrote also, but he didn't. I don't know. He wrote for publications that weren't very good, and he was undisciplined and all that stuff. Anyway, so the guy said to him, "So Bill," he said, "what are you writing these days?" And my father, I can remember, I was standing right there, said, "Garbage writing." And I thought later, I didn't think it then. It kind of goes through you like a little bit of a arrow that's what your dad says, But it then occurred to me that that was the construct that he built around himself, that he needed to do whatever. I don't want to deprive him of that, even though it was horrifying. My point being that all these constructs are malleable. They can change, I think.
Yeah. Thank you for this
Well, I hope I
another
said two
wonderful
things that make
conversation.
sense, and I couldn't appreciate this more.
I love you. I love you. Thank you for the way that you show up in the world.
You're welcome, and thank you for this. You're just a beautiful person. You know how, Paula, and I think of you. I know you know. We love you.
I
I love
do.
you. Period. The end.
Oh, so many great takeaways, whether you're an actor or not. What drives you? How is that informed by what you did or didn't get as a child? So acknowledgement kept coming up. That's a theme that Paul is exploring as a writer. And he's using writing to understand what he knows about that and what his experience has been, that what was missing in his relationship with his father was acknowledgement. He was dismissed as a child. So it brings up that inquiry for me. Where is the acknowledgement missing in my life? Where do I seek it out? So for Paul, he was getting it from acting, getting a laugh, directing, producing, writing, winning awards, owning a company, teaching. And that line of inquiry that he opened up, what really lights you up and how does that feel? I love when he said, finding what you love to do is like stepping in cement. When he directed Waiting for Godot, it was like I stepped in cement. Then the cement hardened. I felt completely connected, that there was a purpose that had roots that I could explore. The more I directed, the more I wanted to be a better director. So I know most of you are not actors, but what Paul was saying about how we connect with stories is applicable as an audience member, as a listener. It is the actors who connect with the emotional life of the characters that capture our imagination. It's the full kidnap. They make us believe that we are living in the story with the characters. And it's not about great reading or vocal tone. We need great actors to bring those stories to life. So yeah, when we say that we don't like a narrator's performance, it's often not that we didn't like their voice. We didn't believe them. So great actors don't try to sound like the characters, they become them. So for an actor to make us believe in the character, it takes more than a lovely voice. We don't want somebody to read to us. We want somebody to bring the story to life. So it's about connecting with the subtext, the emotion, the needs behind the words. And it's also about what's not spoken, bringing the silent white space of what's not said to life. Jess Taylor from last week's episode, he talked about this, about the omission. What's not being said is just as important. And acting is reacting and replicating real life so that we can't tell the difference. So the voice just makes sound. It can't act. So a lot of actors, a lot of narrators are phoning it in at that high level that Paul was talking about. They're relying on their voice and indicating feeling rather than experiencing it. And it doesn't move us. We call bullshit. We don't believe it. So when actors sing and indicate emotion with vocal tricks and get into rhythms and patterns and modulate their voice and push and emphasize words, affecting their voice to direct us what to think in place of dropping into the emotional needs of the characters, they lose us. We don't believe it and it doesn't feel real. It also deprives us of being ahead. Jess was also talking about this last week, wasn't he? So as listeners, as audience members, we want to be able to anticipate what we don't know. So we can be experiencing the action, be right there with the emotions of the moment in real time, like we're living it as the characters. And a great actor takes us on that magic carpet ride. And stories, they really do help us make sense of a world that defies understanding, like Paul said. And understanding a story has zero to do with intellect. We connect with the feelings no matter what walk of life we come from. Oh, that was so true when he said that. The literary quality of the piece has nothing to do with whether or not it moves us. And the characters, they don't know if they're in literary fiction or a trashy romance. They're just experiencing life. What did he say? For them, it's all Shakespeare and the stakes are really high. And if it's well acted, we actually don't care about the content. We go with it. We connect with it. We're right in there with it. And the lessons about working with some of the people really touched me. We do all share the same emotions and we are all having a human experience. It's always instructive and informative to think about what we do have in common as opposed to what we don't. And just deciding to make somebody feel respected and let them know that you're here to help. and don't make assumptions. The Mitch McConnell story is a great example of that you can break bread, have lunch, treat each other with respect, even if you disagree on fundamental issues. You coat check your assumptions and ego at the door, and you don't leverage who you are at the expense of working together and being kind and meeting somebody where they're at. Oh, I wish Mitch McConnell had done that as beautifully in Congress as he did in the studio with Paul that day. And creating a rapport with somebody, finding that point of connection like Lynn Redgrave did and Burt Reynolds did, showing people you respect them, you're there to help and meet them, and giving people the benefit of the doubt and giving it time. The Ash Carter story about him being nervous and out of his comfort zone and then settling in once he felt safe and supported and more confident in a domain that he was not used to being in. And striving for excellence no matter what. The Michael J. Fox story, it will always stay with me. He didn't want his ability to be defined by his disease or physical limitations. He wanted to be ridden like a stallion, like Paula worked with him just like any other actor. And look what happened. They ended up winning a Grammy. It was extraordinary because he is a great actor, and a teachable moment for Paul and for me, and hopefully for you as well, just to treat anybody the way that you would treat anybody else. And awards, they're nice, but acknowledgement, it just really resonates in your body when somebody goes, I believe it, I felt it, I was right there with you, that was amazing. And one of the big takeaways, just the importance of stories, of sharing yours and letting the stories of others in. That we need stories to figure out what is absurd, and we create stories to help us understand things and make our lives better. And vulnerability. Actors have to bring their vulnerability into the booth. Listeners, as audience members, we also have to bring ours as well to really let a story into our hearts. We want to be seen, but we don't want to feel exposed, and there's a fine line. So you have to expose yourself as an actor if you want to really inhabit a character and be inside a story and help tell it. But as an audience member, as a listener, you've also got to expose yourself if you really want to let a story touch you and learn from it. I really emphasize the point again about listening to an audiobook at a faster speed. You know, if you're listening to nonfiction, you're short on time, you need the information, you just want to get it really quickly. But with fiction, giving yourself the time to listen, to feel, to believe, to experience, to breathe the air of the story and go on that magic carpet ride, like Paul was saying. And the lesson from Paul, just as a human being, he lives in a tenacious and disciplined way. He doesn't define himself by age, choosing to be emotionally connected to your world and the worlds that you inhabit. I'm going to keep on going until the opportunity to keep on going doesn't exist anymore. It was a great anecdote, wasn't it? How do you want to live? Do you want to live a long time? I just want to live well. And I really appreciated what he said about it has to be me. That inquiry, that it suggests that there may be more to me than even I think there is in this moment. Makes me feel more connected to who I am. Oh, that really touched my heart. The stories that we tell about ourselves and others, they are made up. We get to choose what those stories are and which stories we hook onto and which stories we base our choices on. What did he say? The construct is okay, but you don't want the construct to become concretized so that it feels real and there's no way out of it. Constructs are malleable, they can change. I love his phrase, I'm going to choose to deprive myself of a made-up construct that I just told. Instead, I'm going to listen to who I am and let my feelings propel me to do the best that I can. I can create a believable story that I'm someone that can get it done. That's where the eggs are. Oh, I love that phrase. So where are your eggs? Where are you choosing to put them? Oh, gosh, I'm so interested in what resonated for you as an actor or a narrator or an audiobook listener. Let me know in the Facebook group. Write a review. I'm excited to hear.
I want to hear about your It Has To Be Me story. So head on over to ithastobeme.com/stories to share it in our free community. You can also join the conversations we're having about this episode and others. I'm Tess Masters. Join me next week and we'll dive inside another great story to help us go from dreaming to doing.